Hello everybody, Creepypasta Goblin here. In this video we have a collection of Reddit stories, which I hope you'll enjoy. This video includes 3 different narrators. There's myself, of course, and Viidith and Jacqueline Nym, my 2 collaborators. I'd like to thank both of them for taking part, and I hope you can all go and check out both of their channels. I'll link them down below. I'll put them in the comment section. So, me, Viidith and Jacqueline Nym, and I hope you enjoy. I was 10 years old and lived in a small coastal town in Newfoundland that was littered with large forests. Almost every house had acres of forestry behind it, which in itself was very beautiful. As I now am 21 and live in a bustling city in Alberta, I do find myself missing this setting in my old backyard every once in a while. But it's usually accompanied by the unsettling memory of what I'm about to recount. By the time I was in grade 4, I was already trusted to be home by myself, as my mother went out to visit my grandmother and aunt, who literally lived a few minutes down the road. I was happy to have such a privilege. I was an only child and my father worked in another province for months at a time, so I was very lucky to have this opportunity. It usually meant late-night movies and video gaming, and on the odd night, exploring the forests. This night I was exploring said woods. I usually didn't go too far in. Normally, up to a large rock formation I liked to climb and look out through the trees in all directions. The house was always in sight, so I never felt scared or frightened by being there. It felt like my own private place that I could enjoy. So as I was scaling the rocks to sit in my usual spot, I suddenly started hearing a sound from further in. A sound that wasn't natural at all. Crying. Faint crying. It sounded like a child, maybe even an infant, crying relentlessly. I was more puzzled than scared, since crying was the last thing I would expect to hear in the forest. I must have listened for a good few minutes, convinced my ears were playing tricks on me, but it was in fact crying. In my mind I imagined it was a young girl that somehow wandered too far into the forest and needed my help. I considered going back to the house and calling my mother to help, but then I worried that the girl would wander further in beyond earshot. I decided to try to locate the sound myself. I made my way hastily through the trees and branches, trying to figure out the exact direction the crying was coming from. It definitely wasn't as easy as I thought, and it was a matter of trial and error to even make sure I was going in the right direction. One thing I never realized as I was doing all of this was how consistent this crying was. No pauses, no words of any kind. Just non-stop sobbing and wailing that had no end. What I did notice was that the closer I got to the sound, the more metallic it sounded to me. I eventually reached a small clearing that had only a few small trees and bushes and nothing else. I had never gone this far in before, so this was the first time I had ever seen it. When I made my way in, it didn't take long for me to find the source of the sound. A grey tape recorder, one of the biggest I had ever seen, was peeking out of one of the bushes, and the crying was coming out of its speakers. This really disturbed me, as I had gone all this way expecting to find a real person, but it was just a tape recorder. As I was about to shut it off, I heard another sound coming from just outside the clearing, on the opposite side. It sounded like steady steps, advancing in my direction. It only took seeing a tall, shadowy figure coming my way to send me running. Fortunately, by some miracle, I recognized my way back by identifying rocks and trees I identified as landmarks. Looking back, this probably saved my life. I just never looked back, and I didn't try listening to see if that person was following me. I just kept telling myself to make it home, and nothing else. I had to get home. Once I saw the large rock formation, It didn't take me long to know the rest of the way without needing to survey my surroundings. I was out of the forest in record time and immediately ran into my house, locking the door and turning off all the lights as I went to my bedroom. I didn't want this person to know where I lived, or I would really be done for. After shutting the curtains, I peeked out through them as discreetly as I could, to see if whoever had been out there had actually managed to keep up with me. I didn't see anyone, but I stayed by that window for a good hour, waiting for something to emerge out of the forest shadows, but nothing ever did. After that, I went straight to bed. I never did tell my mother about what happened that night, and I also was never able to go back into that forest again.
When I was 21, I transferred to a college in San Francisco. I checked out a room for rent on Craigslist. It was in a really nice 2-bedroom apartment. It was cheap rent and close to campus, so it was the ideal spot. The girl who lived there was 29, and her name was Beth. She was tall and wide. She had jet black hair and wore pale makeup. She seemed nice, although a little quiet. But she seemed to like me, and agreed to let me move in. So far, so good. My first night there, we went out for pizza, and that's when I could tell that something was a bit off with her. Throughout dinner, she kept telling me how much I looked like Shia LaBeouf. I didn't know what to say, so I just shrugged it off with a thanks. I mean, I looked nothing like Shia LaBeouf, so it just didn't make any sense to me. When we got back home, she asked if I had seen her room yet. I said no, and so she took me to see it. Her walls were covered in posters of Shia LaBeouf. She even had printed out photos of him all over her mirror. She owned all his movies. I didn't know what to make of it. It was creepy. The whole night she had been saying I looked like him, and now it's obvious to me that she's obsessed with the guy. A few weeks passed, and I never really saw her that much. We didn't spend any time together, really. She would come home from work and practically run to her room, and she would spend the whole night there. She had this creepy, high-pitched giggle, and I would hear her giggling through the wall at night. I wonder what the hell she could possibly be doing. Occasionally, she would come out and talk for like 2 minutes. She would always be slurring her words, so I suspected she was drinking a lot. Sometimes she wouldn't say anything. She would just stand in the hallway and watch me in the living room. I would turn and see her and be surprised and say, hello, Beth. And then there would be this long, awkward pause, and she would give out her creepy, high-pitched giggle. It was uncomfortable being around her, and she gave me the chills. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. because I heard what sounded like the front door being unlocked. I came out of my bedroom, and all the lights were off, but I could still see Beth standing at the front door. She had her face against it. She was turning the lock back and forth over and over again. And every time she turned the bolt, she mumbled my name. Max Barker. Max Barker. Max Barker. Seeing her standing in the dark and mumbling my name really freaked me out. And it doesn't help that she kinda looks like a bigger version of the girl from The Ring. I just quietly went back to my room and tried to sleep. One night I was watching Gladiator, and she stumbled out of her room and turned on the living room light, forcing me to pause the movie, which was annoying. She then asked me if I wanted to hear about her ex-boyfriend. It was an uneasy segue into the topic, but I just said sure, then awkwardly sat back to listen to her. 10 minutes into her story, and she was so riled up. She was screaming at the top of her lungs about their breakup. I was worried that the neighbors were going to call the cops, and she wasn't going to listen to me when I was asking her to lower the volume. Amidst all of her screaming, one thing she said really freaked me out. She was in such a fit and yelled, "I'll slit his fucking throat." That was a big game changer. Suddenly, I had no idea what this girl was capable of. She was practically a stranger, and everything I had seen was becoming alarmingly disturbing. After a few more minutes, she told me thanks for listening, and she started doing her giggle. I got out of there pretty fast and went to my room to go to sleep. I had a pretty unsettling feeling about being in the house with her. And what's worse is that there was no lock on my bedroom door. I pushed the edge of my dresser in front of it to act as a little barricade. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my dresser scraping against the floor. Beth was pushing the door open. I turned on my light, shouting at her to stop. I could see her through the opening of the door. She was so drunk and had this insane look in her eyes. I pushed the door closed and yelled at her to go to bed. I could hear her walk back to her room, but I couldn't fall back asleep. The next morning, when I went out into the hallway, my heart dropped. I saw one of her steak knives was on the floor by my door. I got goosebumps all over my arms. All I could think about was her saying she would slit that guy's throat. I confronted her about it, and she said she didn't remember trying to push my door open. She said she didn't even remember telling me about her ex. I had enough. My lease was month to month, so I found a new spot and moved out. About a month after I moved out, she contacted me. I was at the movies and my phone was off. When I got out, I turned my phone on, and to my shock, I received in 40+ text messages that she had sent me over the past 2 hours. They were all just insane texts that ranged from everything between, "Hi, how are you?" to, "I fucking hate you." It was insane. I didn't respond, and I never heard from her again. I always wonder, if I hadn't set my dresser in front of my door, would she have quietly come into my room and slit my throat? It freaks me out. My dad owns a construction company, and during the summer I used to work there for some extra cash. Mostly, my job was to clean and to assist the supervisors with whatever they needed. It was hard work, with unbearably hot conditions due to Alabama summers. But it paid well, and gave me something to do. I was the only female who worked there, and so it was not uncommon for creeps to mess with me. Currently, I am 24. This particular incident happened when I was 16 during the first year of working this job. Now, for those who don't know, construction companies usually have their own employed workers to oversee the construction, while other companies are hired to do specialty work, such as electricity, plumbing, painting, etc. So the job site is filled with complete strangers who are there to do their jobs and then go home. They rarely try to strike up a conversation with you, or even acknowledge your existence. Well, most of the time. We were in the middle of building a 3-story high church. There were 2 stairways, and my job was to scrub all the steps down with a toothbrush. This was tedious, and the easiest thing to do was for me to just sit on the steps as I worked, This meant I was unintentionally out of sight, and I worked quietly. I'm about halfway down the stairs, and there's a landing at the halfway point where pipes and AC ducts are running through the walls. I could hear a man cursing to himself as he attempted to install a pipe. I could not see him yet, but I could hear him. I didn't give it a second thought and continued quietly working. As I scooted further down the stairs, the man noticed me. He began to apologize, saying things like, "Oh, I didn't see you there. I'm sorry for my language. If I had seen you, I wouldn't have said it." I glanced up at this to see what this guy looks like. He's obviously not one of our workers, but belongs to one of the other companies we had hired. He looks to be in his mid-40s and is a carbon copy of Steve Buscemi, if Steve Buscemi was bald and missing some teeth. I reassure him that it's fine and that I hear worse in school. He chuckles at this, and we both began working again. He then started making small talk, asking which school I go to and how old I am, is one of the construction workers my dad, etc. I'm not in the mood for small talk, but I do my best to answer him politely, while also being very short with him, hoping he would realize I didn't really want to be bothered. When I answered his question about my age with, "I'm 16, he looked intensely at me and said, "You're 16 and already married?" My mind immediately goes into what the fuck mode. Why would he think that that statement was a perfectly normal one to make, despite the fact that it had nothing to do with our conversation? He sees my confused expression and grins, clarifying, "Your ring." At the time, I had a silver band ring that I wore on my left ring finger, giving the appearance of a wedding ring. I simply wore it there because that's the finger that fits best. I'm immediately uncomfortable with how things were going. I'm at least 15 feet away from him, and he still somehow notices that small ring on my finger? Him questioning me about marriage is already unsettling in itself. I'm a 16-year-old kid, and he's old enough to be my dad. I explain that it's not a wedding ring. He laughs at that and says, all us men should consider ourselves lucky then. I scrunch my face up, unsure what he meant or whether or not it was an insult. He explains, "Because you're still single, I mean." Officially uncomfortable, I turned back around and began furiously cleaning the stairs, praying that this guy finishes what he's doing so he can leave. I refuse to move down the stairs any further until he's gone. I don't want to get closer to him. Several uncomfortable questions later, the guy seems to finish and leaves. I breathe a sigh of relief and work on finishing the stairs. About 10 minutes later, the guy comes back with a cold bottle of Mountain Dew and holds it right in front of my face. I gingerly take it, and he says, "It's pretty hot in here. You look like you needed it." Thanks," I replied. He then goes back to working in the stairwell while I just sit there and stare at the drink in my hand. It was strange. There's no electricity or AC in the building yet, so it's very hot. This church is in the middle of nowhere, and no gas stations or stores are close by. There's no vending machines out there either. It's towards the end of the day, so the ice in everyone's coolers has long since melted, and all their personal drinks are hot. Yet this Mountain Dew is cold as ice. Cautiously, I open the bottle, and quickly realize that the lid has already been cracked from someone opening it. They obviously tried to reclose it, in an attempt to hide the fact that it's been open. I peer into the bottle, to see little granules or something at the bottom of it. I quickly make the decision to not drink any of this. The guy has been watching me and questions why I haven't drank any yet. I just flat out ignored him and act like I didn't hear his question. Out of the corner of my eye, I realized that he hasn't brought any of his tools back with him, and that at first glance he looks like he's working. but when I pay close attention, I see that he's actually not doing anything. He's just making the motions of doing work while watching me when he thinks I'm not looking. He keeps insisting I have some of the drink because it's so hot, and I look like I'm gonna overheat. When he is unable to get a response from me, he changes tactics and attempts small talk again while I frantically try to think of how to get out of this situation. This part of the building is completely deserted. It's why I chose to clean these stairs first, so I wouldn't have to work around the other workers. The chances of someone walking through are non-existent. You're working here with your dad, right? Who's your dad? A maniacal grin spread across my face as I realized he's just given me a way out. I answer, Kelvin, the owner of his construction business. His face turns pale, and in a reedy voice says, the big boss, huh? Yup. He quickly decides he has somewhere else to be. He didn't attempt to interact with me for the rest of the day, but I did catch him staring intently at me whenever we were in the same room. I threw away the Mountain Dew. So, Steve Buscemi lookalike, let's not meet again.
So first, a little background. I went to a fairly large middle school that had kids from at least 3 cities in the area all going to it. From there, I went to a small high school with maybe 300 kids total. My high school was a highly competitive charter school located in the mountains and surrounded by several acres of woods. I met this guy, Sam, in middle school, but didn't really interact with him much. It was more one of those friend of my friends things. Fast forward to my sophomore year of high school. Sam transfers into my high school. My high school did blocked schedules, so we had 4 classes and a sort of study hall homeroom class in the middle of the day. Sam transferred partway through sophomore year, and I don't know how this happened, but he ended up in 4 out of my 5, counting homeroom study hall, classes. At this time, I had established a bit of a reputation at the school for being helpful and a good student, so when Sam transferred and seemed to be having a tough time, I was asked to sort of take him under my wing and help him out. Boy, do I regret doing that. One of the classes we had together was a history class that I also had with one of my best friends. Despite her protests, my teacher made the 2 of us work with Sam on all our group projects. Sam was already kind of creepy with me, even though he has been at our school for less than a week. When we started working together, he would sit uncomfortably close to me, and at first he wouldn't say much, but as he got up more courage, he started talking to me. At first, it was all normal stuff. I had an older boyfriend at the time who was in the Air Force and stationed in Japan. I know that sounds like one of those lies high school girls make up to get creepy guys to back up, but this was true. We were childhood friends and had started dating shortly before he enlisted. So I made sure Sam knew I wasn't looking for anything more than a friend, but it didn't take long before he started flirting with me. His flirting quickly escalated from compliments and asking if my boyfriend Alex was real to trying to steal the virginity ring I wore every day off my finger and joking that one day it wouldn't be just the ring he was stealing. I was freaked out, but I figured there wasn't much he could do since we only saw each other at school and he had no clue where I lived. Back when I was in high school, the chat that's part of Gmail, now called Google Hangouts, was like the AIM messenger of the time, so everyone used it, and there were several group chats that I was a part of for my school that used personal email addresses rather than our school Gmails. Through this, Sam got my email address. He started sending me creepy, sexually explicit emails of the things he dreamed about. I won't share the one I still have saved, but they were gross, especially to a Christian virgin girl. He often had some part about me moaning how I loved him, not Alex, over and over again. Eventually, it got so bad that one of my friends reported what was happening to school administration. They basically sent out an email to the entire school administration that Sam wasn't allowed to communicate with me at school. This freed me from everything but the creepy sex emails that came in on a weekly basis, at least until the end of the year. Junior year, Sam was keeping his distance, but we had a class together, so we had started interacting at a minimal level. I mostly just ignored him and hung out with my friends, though. Senior year is when things started getting really bad again, and I didn't realize how bad they had actually been my junior year until this point. We both took advanced martial arts as an elective class that year, which meant not only did we have to talk, we actually had to spar and train together. The worst thing about this is that my high school gym was about a 3 to 5 minute walk from the rest of our campus, and you had to walk through a long trail through the woods I mentioned earlier to get there and back. Sam would wait for me every morning at the top of the trail before school and the bottom of the trail after class, just so he could walk with me, although he usually walked a good 5 feet behind me and didn't talk to me. At this point, my long-distance relationship was beginning to fall apart, and Sam saw this as his opportunity. He started telling me stuff about how I was his soulmate, and I just didn't want to see it. He also told me that he had drawn some kind of rune that eternally bonded our souls. Don't ask me what that's supposed to mean. Sam was into all sorts of Wicca, dream walking, and other magic and stuff that I wrote off as stupid jokes. As we came up on the end of our senior year, some of my teachers started asking me about essays, short stories, and poems that I had written and turned in during earlier years. I eventually found out that Sam had been taking my old writing out of the trash at the end of each year when I cleaned out my locker and threw out all those old assignments I no longer cared about, and turning them back in as his own work. I insisted I knew nothing about it, and my school decided to search his locker. The thing was like a crazy shrine to me. He had piles of my old homework and assignments that I had thrown out, and 4 or 5 composition notebooks that I used to keep as diaries, poetry journals, that I assumed I had lost at some point. The school assumed he was simply keeping my work in hopes of turning it back in and getting better grades so he could actually graduate, but it felt really creepy to me. The school took all of my old work and made me take it home, and suggested I not throw out old assignments away at school or I would get in trouble for letting him copy me. Thing is, the other thing they found in his locker that they didn't care about but I did was several word magnets that my friends and I had made to leave notes in each other's lockers. I know they were the ones out of my locker, which meant he also knew my combination. A few weeks after they raided his locker, I was getting changed back into my regular clothes after my martial arts class and discovered that my bra and extra workout shirt were missing out of my locker. I reported it to the school, but nothing ever came of that. I'm fairly sure Sam stole them, but I've never been able to prove that. After that, he stopped talking to me for the most part. I had a new boyfriend who actually went to our school for the last 2 months of my senior year, and Sam was terrified of him. The only things that happened were one composition notebook that I had completely filled with quotes and poems I found and liked, and a bunch of original poems I wrote went missing, and occasionally the magnets and other things in my locker seemed to magically rearrange themselves in ways that didn't make sense. Some of my friends knew my combination, and although they swore they never touched my stuff, I just figured it was them trying to be funny. After graduation, I figured I was finally free of Sam. Instead, he started more legitimately stalking me. At first, it was just emails from accounts I didn't recognize, asking for things that didn't make sense. I marked all of these as spam and ignored them. Then he made an account under the name of one of my former friends from high school. I thought it was actually my friend Becca emailing me, so I responded. We carried on a pretty normal email conversation for a few weeks, and then she got weird. She and I had talked about our relationships and things like that, so she knew I had a boyfriend. She started asking me to send her nudes and insisting that if I didn't, she would hurt herself or try to kill herself. She used to send me pictures of the deep cuts on her arms and even counted off pills she took when I refused to do what she asked. Becca had told me she was living somewhere in Colorado, so I was pretty sure I couldn't call anyone and say someone I knew was trying to threaten and kill themselves. I'm not proud of what I did, or that I fell for Sam's games, but I did what I was told, for fear of being responsible for someone's death. This went on for several months until I finally got tired of it and actually deleted my email address. Things were quiet from there as I started my first year of college. However, I soon found out from a friend of mine that Sam was attending the community college, which was within walking distance of the college I was attending. I didn't think Sam knew where I was going to college, so I figured I'd be fine, and I was, for about the first month. Sam started showing up outside of my classes. At first he would just stand there in the sea of people, leaving my class until he knew I saw him, and then he would walk away. This started to really freak me out, and at the time I had no friends at the college and no boyfriend to intimidate Sam. After a few weeks I started getting emails to my college email address. They always came from different email addresses and had no subject and always 4 attachments. They were always me, somewhere on campus, eating, in class, headed to my car, even photos of me heading into the bathroom. I reported everything to campus police, but they told me that unless I could prove who was stalking me, there wasn't much they could do about it. I established the habit of getting on and off campus as quickly as possible and not talking to or interacting with anyone. After my first semester and Christmas break, things calmed back down for a while, and I started trying to make friends, which turned out to be a mistake, but that's a story for another time and another Reddit. I had started working at a store in my local mall, and I hadn't heard from Sam or Becca in several months. Sam started showing up at my work that January. I worked in a home decor store, so the store had pretty narrow walkways between displays, and it was next to impossible to notice someone coming up behind you, and the cameras in half the store were dead. At first, he would just wander around, and if I was working, he might do something like break something in my section of the store. One of my coworkers actually saw him do it a few times. I worked on a rotating schedule, so I worked different times and different days every week, so he couldn't just wait for me to show up. If he went to the store and I wasn't there, he would ask when I was working, claiming to be my boyfriend. After 2 or 3 times of my managers and coworkers asking me why my boyfriend had come in asking for my schedule, I found out it was Sam. I explained the situation to my managers, and they let everyone know that if Sam showed up while I was working, they had to alert the manager and me so I could stay in the back. They were also told to tell Sam that I no longer worked there in hopes that he would stop. It took my manager threatening to call mall security for him to finally stop coming around my work. After that, he went quiet again for almost a year, before popping up on my social media again last year. He claimed that he had changed and that he wanted a second chance. Me, being the stupid person that I am, and always wanting to give people the benefit of the doubt and only see the best, started to rebuild a friendship with him. At this point, I was actually single, but trying to build a solid friendship with a guy I'd had a thing for a really long time, my now fiancé. It was only a week into us talking before he started being creepy again and begging for nudes and sending me messages like the sex emails he used to send in high school. My now fiancé, then he was just my best friend, although he asked me out within a couple of weeks of this, signed into my account on Snapchat and basically ranted at this guy, telling him to leave his girlfriend alone, and the next inappropriate message he sent would mean my boyfriend immediately blocked his account and he would never speak to me again. After that, I tried to put some distance between us, although I tried to be friendly and answer when he talked to me. After a couple months of this, Becca made a reappearance. She started talking to me on Instagram as someone completely different. We talked for a few weeks before she started sending me messages that made it clear it was really Becca/Sam. My fiancé and I have a theory that Sam decided to bring Becca back as a way to attempt to make me dependent on Sam again. She went back to her old tricks with the self-harm and the suicide threats. Except this time Sam used the timed photo thing on Instagram and his little sister to really add a punch to it and make me truly believe she was trying to hurt or kill herself. I told her I knew who she was and that she was lying. She threatened to blackmail me with the old images I had sent her way back in my first year of college if I didn't send her more. Instead, I told my boyfriend, and he used his tech nerdiness to check out the metadata on her photos and discovered that they were screenshots from some other account, and that this person actually lived in the same state as us. We reported Becca to both Instagram and our local police, and I spoke with a lawyer friend of mine about the things she had said, and then blocked both Becca and Sam. The only thing that's happened since then is that a few accounts have popped up on Facebook and Whisper using my images, both the appropriate and explicit ones, and claiming to be me. My fiancé has a search algorithm set up to find them, although as soon as one comes up, it's down before either of us gets the chance to report it. It doesn't happen consistently, and entire months go between incidents, but honestly, I wish it would just stop already.